In the last few months, we have witnessed two profoundly world-changing events. First, we had the coronavirus pandemic, which has sickened millions, killed hundreds of thousands, and created an enormous challenge for our economy, for our healthcare system, and for our own children's Minnesota. And then we had the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers just a few blocks from here, and captured on video in a way that makes it impossible for those of us, primarily white people, who for a long time have had the privilege to ignore what has been very obvious to black and brown people all along, but made it impossible for us to ignore it any longer. And that has led to global protests demanding not only justice for George Floyd, but an end to the racism that his tragic death is just the latest demonstration of. In the last couple of weeks, I've heard more people, both in casual conversation and official communications, and people from across the partisan spectrum, more people using terms like racism and white supremacy than I've ever heard before. And I want to talk about that a little bit because some people, again, primarily white people, are uncomfortable with those terms. And honestly, until recently, I was uncomfortable using those terms. And I think it was because of the way I was interpreting or misinterpreting them. Robin DiAngelo, in her book, White Fragility, notes that the term racism is often used to refer to somebody's personal beliefs, their personal animosity or hatred towards someone of a different race. But that's prejudice, that's bigotry. Racism, I've come to learn, is a system. It's a set of laws and customs and institutions and hierarchies that together serve to advantage one race, whites, over another. And that structural racism, which is manifest not only as the disproportionate use of force against people of color, but in all the disparities that we see in our society. Those disparities in educational opportunities, in employment, income, wealth, health outcomes. That structural racism does not depend on individual ill will or malintent. In fact, racist systems can be sustained and promulgated even when the vast majority of us have the purest of motives and the best of intentions. So when I and other leaders talk about the need to dismantle racism in our community and right here within Children's Minnesota, that is not meant in any way as a personal attack. It is not meant to disparage anyone. Calling out racism is not calling into question anyone's motives or integrity or character. It is calling for systemic change. And I don't think of myself as a particularly prejudiced or bigoted or racist individual, but I know that I have to be part of creating that systemic change. Now, the structural racism has been with us for 400 years, and racism in America has been a particularly intransigent problem, and progress has been painfully slow and halting. And in the face of that history, it is easy to feel overwhelmed and hopeless. Now, we're seeing some promising signs, some indication that maybe this will be one of those times of progress. And I wanted to end on a hopeful note. But I'm not going to do that. I can't ask you to be hopeful, because hope is not a strategy. I don't want you to have hope. I want you to act. We can't just hope for change. We have to create it. The opposite of hope is not despair. The opposite of hope is determination. And so, don't be hopeful. Be determined. And if you are determined, if you're determined to make Children's Minnesota and our community more equitable and more inclusive, then don't just hope for it. Let's join together and do it. Thank you.